Live with CDP Sports Talk, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and TuneIn. Now, here's your host, Chris Palme.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 54, overall 494 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by and sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, along with their great selection of all-electric vehicles and Cadillac products. You can call the dealership at 519-824-0210. Tell them Chris Palme sent you. Or you can email the dealership at info@barrycullen.com. Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership has been family-run and operated here in the city of Guelph since 1969. I've been a proud customer of Barry Cullen Chevrolets since 2000, so 25 years. And Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership has been a sponsor of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show for the last 2.5 years as well. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Show is also sponsored by Wellington Brewery at 950 Woodlawn Road West in Guelph, Ontario. Check out their website, wellingtonbrewery.ca. Try a Wellion, and please remember to drink responsibly. Wellington Brewery is celebrating their 40th year as one of Canada's oldest local craft breweries as well. And I want to say thank you to Jackie Hanna from Wellington Brewery for coming aboard Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show as the official beer sponsor of Wellington Brewery. And Wellington Brewery is also proudly Canadian as well. So please support local and support Canadian as well. I hope everyone's doing well on this snowy, blizzard, snowy type Tuesday, February 12th, 2025 here in Southern Ontario. Tonight's guest, unfortunately, had to cancel due to another commitment. Amaricia Hawkins, a stand-up comedian. Unfortunately, she will not be on tonight, but I have two amazing guests coming on tonight. My first amazing guest, he is from Buffalo, New York. He is a podcast host of his own show called the 716 Sports Blizzard Podcast based out of Buffalo, New York. He is a huge podcaster, but he's also a huge sports fan of the Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres, Buffalo Bisons, Buffalo Bandits. And my second guest tonight will be at 7:35 Eastern with Patrick Pierce. He is a former broadcaster turned into a public relations professional out in San Diego, and he is a lifelong Kansas City Chiefs fan. And Patrick's going to come on, and he's going to talk Kansas City Chiefs with us as well, guys. So anyways, I'm going to bring on my first guest tonight, Robby Snyder. Hi, Robby. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Chris.
How's things in Buffalo, New York right now with the weather specifically? Are you getting snow like we are here?
Yeah, I'm getting the snow here, and earlier today it was blowing sideways, so.
So do you have a snowblower or do you shovel?
I mean, I shovel it or sometimes I have help and with the snowblower.
Yeah. Do you like snow? Are you a fan of winter?
I mean, I like the cooler temperatures, but
not a big fan of snow.
Not.
No. But hey, what kind of t-shirt do you have on today?
It's
Bill's Mafia.
Yeah. But
Robby, go ahead, Robby. Go ahead.
But I also like the Philadelphia Eagles.
Hey, look at all my teams. The Toronto Argonauts, the Philadelphia Eagles, Michigan Wolverines. What do they all have in common, Robby?
the 3 teams, they have championships.
Absolutely. And I'm sort of getting bored with this winning stuff. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Hey, Robby, since I got you on here, let's talk Super Bowl 59. We'll start off with Super Bowl 59. I know you're disappointed that your team didn't get to the Super Bowl, but we'll get to the Bills after. I want to get your thoughts and your opinions on the Philadelphia Eagles 44-20 win over the Chiefs on Super Bowl 59, and who you were cheering for, and just thoughts and your opinions on the game.
I liked that Philadelphia could like pass the ball, like get it downfield, and being able to get in the end zone as often as they were able to.
Kansas City did a good job with Saquon Barkley, but Saquon Barkley had 57 yards rushing, which was his lowest total of the year, but he also had 41 yards rushing. And if you also watched the game too, Robby, did you see how much he protected Jalen Hurts? You know, when Kansas City were blitzing and tried to get to Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley is also a great pass blocker. And to me, as great a running back as Saquon Barkley is, you need players like Saquon Barkley, not just for his running ability, but he can also catch the football out of the backfield and blocking, pass protection. And to me, he didn't have his best statistics in that game, but he was an impact with his blocking of Kansas City's front four. And I thought the big turnover, the big play in the game, obviously A.J. Brown being called pass on interference. I was thinking, oh, here we go again. Kansas City getting all these calls and stuff like that. But you know what? Kansas City got the ball back when Philly had to punt it. And guess what? They shut them down. And then Philly got the ball back. And then, boom, Hurts went to Dotson for, 32 yards. Then Hurts touchdown, 7-0. Just give me some more thoughts and views of the game, Robby, from a Buffalo Bills perspective.
Like when the Philadelphia defense was able to get to Patrick Mahomes and sack him
6 times.
6 times, I was like, yeah, that's the defense the Bills need, is to be able to pressure the quarterback.
Absolutely. And 6 sacks. They had 2 back-to-back sacks on 2 straight plays, and they also got a fumble and 2 interceptions. You saw how Patrick Mahomes did against Philadelphia. How was he different from that game compared to your Buffalo Bills from a Bills fan perspective?
He looked like he was more rattled than when they would play the Bills.
And is Mahomes as effective when he's under pressure like Philadelphia put him under?
No, it doesn't.
He's not. He's not the same. He's not the same quarterback. And to me, Philadelphia, what they did to him is remember Super Bowl 55 and Tampa Bay beating Kansas City 31-9. Don't you see similarities between the Eagles and the Buccaneers team against Mahomes?
Yeah. Mahomes looked a lot different under a lot of pressure.
As a Bills fan, Robby, as a Bills fan, what could the Bills learn from this Super Bowl loss of the Kansas City Chiefs to the Philadelphia Eagles?
I think they could take in how the defense played against Kansas City.
Absolutely. Now, do you feel the current Buffalo Bills team right now, if they stay status quo, can beat Kansas City next year if they keep everything the same, Robby, after what happened to Kansas City again in the AFC Championship game?
if they could probably change one person or one thing in their lineup, I think they would be good enough to beat Kansas City.
Well, hey, I want to say this to you, Robby. Last year, the Philadelphia Eagles started 10-1, and then they collapsed, finished 11-7, lost the NFC East, got put out by Tampa Bay in the first round. The Eagles had the 32nd ranked defense in the National Football League last year, dead last. They went from dead last, Robby, to number 1. Howie Roseman obviously went out in free agency and got Zach Bond from the Saints. He signed Saquon Barkley because the Giants were stupid and gave him away. And then look at his draft picks: Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Nakobe Dean, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. And Chris Brown of the Bills yesterday on WGR was mentioning, the reason the Eagles have had success and the Bills haven't is because the Bills have made the playoffs every year. And I'm thinking, hey, Chris, by the way, Chris, I respect him as a professional broadcaster, and he does a great job on the Bills broadcast. But I tweeted him back and said, the Eagles have made the playoffs 7 out of 8 years, the same amount of time as the Buffalo Bills. The Eagles have only missed the playoffs once in the last 8 years, and that was 2020. The Eagles have not had high draft picks other than Jalen Carter, which was a first-round pick a couple years ago, 9th overall. They got a lot of these picks from the Carson Wentz trade when they traded Carson Wentz away. And Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell went at the end of the first round or the second round. The Philadelphia Eagles in the last 7 years, Robby, have been in 3 Super Bowls and won 2 championships. They haven't had a top 5 pick. You know what I mean? Their highest pick since then has been Jalen Carter, who a lot of teams didn't want to take a chance on. He came out of Georgia and he had some issues. The Eagles took a chance on him. No other NFL team did. And I said to Chris, he never responded back to me, but he gets a lot of tweets. I said, listen, the Eagles have been very successful, probably more successful than Bills the last 8 years. And when you're the top team in the league, Robby, you know this too, you don't always get the best draft picks, but Howie Roseman knows how to draft. And he knows how to acquire draft picks. And I really feel, being an Eagles fan and covering the team media-wise, I feel that he's probably the best GM in football, him and the gentleman in Kansas City. So you can't just say, well, we don't have a top 5 pick, so we can't get good players. Look at Tom Brady. Tom Brady was drafted, 6th round, 199th overall. You can get good players, Hall of Fame players, outside of the first round. You need a good scouting department and you need a good general manager. And as much as I like Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau, they didn't get the job done against Kansas City. And look at the guys with the Eagles: Milton Williams, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. I think the Bills really need to build their team on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive line side of the ball as well. And by the way, I'm a big fan of James Cook. I think James Cook, they need to sign him to a long-term contract. But to me, Chris Brown saying, well, the Bills have been really good the last 8 years. But to say, well, the Eagles are getting all these high draft picks is nonsense, because the Eagles have been a dominant team pretty well the last 8 years as well. And when you finish as a Super Bowl champion or the runner-up, you're drafting number 32 or 31st, Robby. Thoughts on what I'm just trying to say to you there?
Do you think that like the Bills signing James Cook to a long-term deal, do you think that they would give him like what they need to for him to be?
I like Ray Davis. I like Ty Johnson, but they're not number 1 running backs. I think James Cook has really improved. I think James Cook's one of the top 5 running backs. I don't think he's the same as Saquon Barkley, but I think the Bills should sign James Cook to a long-term contract, but they also have to do it with the salary cap book. The Philadelphia Eagles, Howie Roseman, besides being a great talent evaluator and scouting and drafting guys, he also knows how to work the books. And you know this too, Robbie. The NFL is a business, and every team's got a salary cap. So the Bills need to learn how to do that. But James Cook definitely needs to be signed. But to me, the Bills need to upgrade their offensive line a little more, and the defensive line as well, and their secondary too. The Eagles have basically rebuilt their defense through the draft. Obviously, they got Zach Baum from the Saints, and the Eagles need to resign him. He's a free agent, by the way. So I'm hoping he'll stay in Philly, but he's a free agent. But drafting DeJean and Mitchell, you saw how good these rookie cornerbacks were, how important it was. And to me, if Buffalo had a defensive line, maybe not as good as Philly's, I think they would have beaten the Chiefs, Robbie.
Yeah, that one touchdown for the Eagles, by Cooper DeJean, that was
six.
Yeah, that pick six was a nice.
That to me, that cemented the game right there. It was only 10-0 at the time, and Chiefs had the ball right there, and they were still in the game. It was only 10-0, but to me, that Cooper DeJean pick six for a touchdown that made it 17-0. To me, that was really the end of it for the Chiefs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and like the Philadelphia backfield was they played a good football game.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody contributed. And by the way, Kansas City got 22 points, but Robbie, you know this. 16 of those 22 points were in garbage time. Philly should have won this game probably 50-6, but those late touchdowns by Kansas City, meaningless there. And by the way, another big play was the Zach Bond interception of Mahomes there. And then what happens? Hurts to A.J. Brown. And a thing too, by the way, everybody talks about Jalen Hurts. Well, I'm going to get your thoughts, Robbie. And this isn't who's better, Hurts or Allen. I want to get your thoughts, okay? And just be honest with me here. How good is Jalen Hurts as a quarterback who is a Super Bowl MVP? He threw in this game for 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had the 1 interception, unfortunately, but that did not hurt them. Cook intercepted it at the 6-yard line or whatever, and he had 1 rushing touchdown. What makes Jalen Hurts an elite quarterback?
It looked like Jalen Hurts had a lot of time to pass the ball because he can get rid of it quickly.
And he also had good line play, and Saquon Barkley picked up blitzes, but he also had a calm demeanor. And to me, Jalen Hurts has outplayed Patrick Mahomes in both Super Bowls, and he's outplayed him in the last regular season match. In 4 games against Mahomes, he's only 2-2, but he's outplayed him 3 out of 4 times. And what did you think of Jalen Hurts' deep ball? Because everybody's like, oh, the Eagles can only run the ball. They can't pass. They got no passing game. But what did you think of his long passes to A.J. Brown, Dotson, and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert?
Those passes looked like he had a lot of time to get rid of the ball.
And that's the importance of having a good offensive line and also having a running back. Saquon Barkley can pass protect as well. So everybody says, oh, Saquon had a bad game, but he still had 97 yards receiving and rushing. And how many times did Jalen Hurts have that extra time to throw the deep balls? And to me, besides Hurts, I think Barkley was an MVP in this game as well for what he did. And leads to my next question, Robbie. Did you see the Argos? I shouldn't have said Argos. I have the Argos on my mind. Did you see the Eagles dominating this game like they did in Super Bowl 59?
I thought it was going to be like a close game, not a blowout, but at the same time, when the Eagles had possession and then they scored, I thought okay, well then I think Philadelphia is going to take it like in the first few scores.
You thought it was going to come down to the end of the game. Like I predicted the Eagles to win this game 34-20 because I really felt they were a better team altogether. But I know a lot of fans, not just you, thought it was going to be a close game. And for me as an Eagles fan, you want to bury the Kansas City Chiefs because Buffalo's, unfortunately, your team has seen this and a lot of other teams have seen it too. Kansas City, if you let them hang around in the close games, they will get the calls from the officials sometimes or most of the time, but they also find ways of winning games there. And that, unfortunately for the Bills, in that tied game 29-29, I agree Josh Allen got that first down, but unfortunately the referees overruled it. Kansas City went down the field and got that winning field goal. And here's the point, and I'm not criticizing Josh Allen. I know the officiating wasn't great in that game, and it hasn't. And then the Chiefs have had some calls, but the Bills did get the ball back, Robbie, with that game. With 3.5 minutes left, 3 timeouts, 2-minute warning. And unfortunately, Josh Allen couldn't get it done. And all they needed right there, Robbie, was like 40, 45 yards for a Tyler Bass field goal. And Tyler Bass can hit from 60 or 65 as far as I'm concerned. So to me, they had their chances in that. But with the Kansas City Chiefs, you want to bury them because you let the Chiefs hang around, they'll beat you in the end. And for me, I was still nervous in the fourth quarter. I was like, come on, I wanted Philadelphia to get a touchdown at every position to bury Kansas City. Not the run to score up on them. It's just Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs just seem to know how to pull out close games. And for me, it was nice, but I was not even happy the last 5 minutes when Kansas City scored those 2 last, I call them garbage touchdowns. But a team against Kansas City, you've got to play physical. You got to play physical with them. And Kansas City, Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, did a nice job containing Barkley, but Barkley still hurt them in the passing game and also in pass protection as well. So Barkley still had a good game, even if he didn't have big numbers. And okay, Robbie, what we're going to ask you now is this Super Bowl loss the end of the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty and dominance in the AFC going into 2025, Robbie?
I think Kansas City is still going to be like the dominance of the Bills because they have a good defense.
Travis Kelce come back or does he retire here, Robbie?
I would say like Travis Kelce, I think he retires at the end of this.
You think he'll play one more year?
I think he's gonna retire because it looks like he just doesn't have
the passion
or anything.
He looked like he checked out. To me, he looked like he checked out. My gut feeling right now is he's played in 5 Super Bowls, Robbie. He's won 3 Super Bowls. He's won back-to-back rings. He's done everything there is to do in football, and he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, probably a first ballot Hall of Famer. I know he said earlier that he wanted to play another 2 or 3 years, but just from his body language in this game, obviously he's disappointed they lost and they got blown out. But to me, if I had my opinion right now, I wouldn't be shocked if he announced his retirement from football at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either because his brother retired also.
Okay, Robbie, as a Bills fan, what area of weakness does Kansas City need to improve on? Obviously, I think it's their offensive line and their receivers.
I think it's like their offensive line, their receivers. Maybe try to go after a running back.
Well, they have Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, but I don't think Kareem Hunt will be back. I believe Pacheco will be back. But to me, I think the Chiefs need to address the receivers. I'm not a big fan of Hopkins. I think he's done. And Hollywood Brown, I'm not a fan of his. Yeah, I just think the Kansas City I like Worthy. Xavier Worthy, I think, is great. He's going to be a star in this league. But I think Kansas City's biggest priority is their offensive line and the need to get wide receiver help next year and to maybe address the tight end situation because I really feel Kelsey's going to be gone. Okay, Robby, before we let you go in a few minutes, what was your thoughts on the Super Bowl halftime show? I honestly did not watch it. I'm not into Kendrick, the rapper. It's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, I didn't see the Super Bowl halftime show. I mean, like, I don't understand his music enough to pay attention to it.
Did you watch the Super Bowl at home, and did you have like a Super Bowl party?
I watched the Super Bowl with my grandpa, and we had like a little party at his place.
That's all right. All right, Robby. Well, we've talked enough about Super Bowl 59. So you're a big Bills fan, Robby. What was your assessment on this 2024 Buffalo Bills team that went 13-4 in the regular season and then won a couple playoff games against Denver and Baltimore and then fell short to Kansas City again?
I think the Bills did good, like with their play, but I think during this off season, I think they should address maybe the defense, maybe a little bit of the offense, and hopefully next year they can get past the AFC Championship game and go into the Super Bowl.
Thoughts on Sean McDermott? Obviously, he's done a good job as the head coach in 8 years. Should the Bills fire Sean McDermott and move on from him, or do you feel Sean McDermott should get one more year to try to get this team to a Super Bowl?
I think Sean McDermott should get one more year to get the Bills into the Super Bowl.
What's Sean McDermott's biggest strength as a head coach, Robby?
I think it's his defensive mindset that can get the Bills like into the Super Bowl.
With the offseason now here, Robby, for the National Football League, what areas do the Bills need to address in the offseason in terms of the draft and free agency? If you were the Bills GM, Robby, what would you try to do to improve this team for next year?
I would try to get someone from the draft or also maybe free agency.
What area would you go with? Would you go with secondary help first, or would you go with linebackers, or would you address the defensive front four and try to get guys like the Eagles have on their front four?
Start in the backfield and work their way up to the front four.
Are you happy with the Bills receivers? Obviously, Kincaid, Knox, the tight ends, Samuel Curtis Samuel. You had Shakir, Keon Coleman. Do you feel this Bills receiving core is good enough next year, or do you feel they need to add a free agent wide receiver?
And they have Mac Hollins too.
Yes. Do you bring Hollins back next year?
I think Hollins and Coleman were we're good, plus Shakir.
I like Shakir. I think he's good. Robby, I really think Shakir is a good receiver. Keon Coleman, I think in his second year, I think that's going to be huge for the Bills because if he takes a step forward and can become like Devontae Smith, that will be huge. Because right now, Keon Coleman, he's a rookie receiver. It's a lot to expect of him to be dominant. But I think Keon Coleman can be their number one receiver next year. Shakir, I think, is a number 2 or number 3 guy. And Kincaid Knox, I don't believe one of those guys will be back next year. I think Kincaid will be there, but I don't think Dawson Knox will be back there. Hey, Robby, before we wrap this up, can you tell my audience a little bit about yourself and your podcast show, the 716 Sports Blizzard, and when is your next show and who's your next guest?
My
you can do it, Robby.
Show is on YouTube. In the next Bandits game is this Saturday.
When's your next show, Robby, for the 716 Sports Blizzard podcast?
I do them bi-weekly, or if I can get a guest on. My next show might be next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, okay. And where can my audience find your show? It's on YouTube. It's on what? Twitter, Facebook. Is it on Apple and all that too? What's your main platforms? YouTube, I guess.
My main platform would be YouTube to find all the live feeds.
Okay. And before we wrap this up, Robby, what is one fun fact about Robby Snyder that your fans might not know about yet?
I'm also into baseball a little bit. Like with the Bisons and like some of the New York teams.
Yankees or Mets or both?
Well, my dad's a Yankee fan.
Boo. I'm a Tigers fan. What are you looking forward to most to the Buffalo Bisons returning on March 28th?
Looking forward to seeing all the younger Blue Jays.
The Blue Jay prospects.
Yeah.
Robby, before I let you go in 30 seconds, do you remember a Blue Jay player named Jose Batista? You remember Jose Batista when he played for the Blue Jays?
I think so. Who did he play for before that?
He played for the Pirates, and then he played for the Blue Jays. I actually talked to him on the Zoom. He was introduced into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame today. And finally, Robby, where can my audience follow you on social media and your Twitter X handle?
I'm on Instagram, and I'm also on X.
And your X account I've got down here as well. You can follow Robby on Twitter X at 716 Blizzard. And hey, Robby, I want to say thank you so much for coming on my 494th episode tonight. I know it was short notice, and I really appreciate your friendship and your support, and we will see you one of these days. I don't know if I'm going to be at the Bandits game Saturday because the weather here is really bad with snow and freezing rain. So fingers crossed, but I want to say, Robby, continued success with your podcast show. I'd love to come back on your show again and talk some Buffalo Bandits. And hey, there is going to be a three-peat this year in pro sports, and it's going to be our Buffalo Bandits who are going to win 3 straight championships. But there's still a lot of work to do. The Bandits take on the Toronto Rock Friday night here in Mississauga, and then Saturday night back home at the KeyBank Center against San Diego. Robby, are you going to be at the game Saturday night against San Diego?
I'm planning on being there in person at the Bandits game when they wear their Marvel character jerseys.
You need to get one of those. All right, Robby, I'm going to let you go, but I want to say thank you so much for coming on. Continued success. Everybody, please follow Robby on social media and his podcast show, the 716 Sports Blizzard podcast, based out of Buffalo, New York. Even though he's a Bills fan, he's okay with us. And I've converted him into an Eagles fan, an Argos fan, and of course, a Buffalo Bandits fan. So I'm going to let you go, Robby. Have a great night, buddy, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
You too.
You too. Thanks, Robby. That was Robby Snyder, the host of his own podcast show, 716 Sports Blizzard podcast in Buffalo, New York. So please check him out. Before we bring on my second guest, I want to play a little clip because it's a celebration for us Philadelphia Eagle fans. And this is courtesy of the Philadelphia Eagles YouTube channel. And it's one of my favorite fight songs called Fly, Eagles, Fly.
Fly, Eagles, fly, on the road to victory. Fly, Eagles, fly, score a touchdown, 1, 2, 3. It'll blow, it'll high, and watch our Eagles fly. Fly, Eagles, fly, on the road to victory. E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles!
Sorry, folks, I had to play that song to celebrate the Eagles' second Super Bowl championship. That was courtesy of the Elite Sports Tours, Elite Sports Horns on the YouTube channel, Fly Eagles Fly. And I'm excited tonight. I have a second guest on, and this gentleman has been a friend of mine for 4 years. He's a former broadcaster, and he's now a professional public relations person in the beautiful city of San Diego. And he's also a huge diehard fan of the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're going to bring him on right now. His name is Patrick Pierce, and he was kind enough on short notice to come on here tonight and give us a Kansas City Chiefs perspective of the Super Bowl matchup between the Eagles and Chiefs.
Yeah.
Hey, Patrick, how you doing?
Hey, doing well, Chris. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much, my friend, for doing this on such short notice. I had to call what in football they call them audibles for quarterbacks, and tonight I had to call an audible, and I was lucky enough to get two great guests. And the first guest, I hope you follow him. His name is Robby, and he's a really good guy, and he loves his sports teams.
Yeah, that's great. That's what it's all about, right? Is ultimately we're sports fans. Deep down, it's something about us that somewhere in our lives we connected with sports, and here we are today. And I know everyone kind of has their own thing, but for me, it's sports. I know for you as well, Chris, it's sports, and Robby as well, and many more of us. So it makes the world go around, and it's a lot of fun. And obviously, I was born and raised in Kansas City, grew up going to a lot of Chiefs games over the years. My family had season tickets when we were growing up. And so that was more of the Marty Schottenheimer era. So had a lot of, Marty ball that we were kind of, forced to witness, and a lot of running and a lot of, close games, tight games, but obviously had some exciting times, during the 90s with Derek Thomas and Neil Smith and, Dale Carter and James Hasty and all those guys on the defensive side of the ball. They were very dominant, but they never took us to a Super Bowl. And so in many ways, the last few years have been good living for Chiefs fans. It's really the golden era of football. And even though we didn't get the result we wanted on Sunday, certainly, we were hoping for some history, trying to make the first three-peat in the Super Bowl era. Obviously, in NFL history, it's been done before with the Packers, but that was right as the Super Bowl was coming in to be. So technically, there had been no team that had won 3 consecutive Super Bowls, and the Chiefs were right there on the verge of making history. But just were not made. They ran into a buzzsaw. I take my hat off to I tip my cap to the Philadelphia Eagles. They flat out dominated Kansas City from start to finish. I certainly, as a realistic fan, understood that the Eagles had a great team, had an opportunity to win the game, and it was going to be a tough game, even if Kansas City had won. But the fact is, the Eagles just punched the Chiefs right in the mouth. And, the Chiefs just never got on track. As you saw, Patrick Mahomes had his worst game of his professional career. And unfortunately, it was on the world's biggest stage, and that's a tough way to go, because the team had obviously pulled out a lot of close games. But, as we'll talk through a little bit, Chris, it wasn't unexpected if you did watch the season, if you watched how the Chiefs season went and how the Eagles season went. The Eagles really put together and really played like the best team the entire season. After the first couple of weeks, they got a slow start, but once they ramped up and got ready to go, they proved that they were the best team. And I think in many ways, the Chiefs had a lot of flaws that were, Philadelphia directly ripped the veil off, and we all saw it. And the biggest weakness for the Chiefs was the offensive line all season long. They had a patchwork offensive line. They had a few stars that held up well most of the year. Creed Humphrey as center, Trey Smith as guard. But when you've got to flip out your all-star and all-pro left guard Joe Thuney to try and just get through the season at left tackle, that was a struggle down the stretch. And so the Chiefs did win many, close score games. And I know that there's a lot of chatter on social media about, who's getting what calls and stuff. But the fact is the Chiefs pulled out 15 wins. And, as did the Lions, but both teams that had 15 wins, neither of them ended up winning the Super Bowl when it was all said and done. So 15 is kind of that magical number. If you win 15 or more games, that you just don't end up winning the Super Bowl for whatever reason. So we kind of thought the Chiefs might be able to break that streak, but it just wasn't meant to be. And again, the Eagles have an incredible team, and they deserved every bit of this, to be able to celebrate right now. And I know you're a huge Eagles fan, so congratulations to you, Chris.
Well, thank you.
Obviously a great time. And I hope you and everyone else there in Philadelphia and anyone else who's an Eagles fan are enjoying every second of it, because it really is. It is a fun time for you guys. It's obviously a little bit sad and disappointing from this side of things. But it was a great rematch from a couple of years ago, of the game there in Glendale, Arizona. Certainly it was a close game there, and the Chiefs pulled that out at the time, and kind of, was hoping that we'd get a rematch of that. And we got a rematch, but it was more of a good old fashioned butt whooping is what, the Eagles put on the Chiefs. And there's no other way around it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It was a very good season for the Chiefs, but it wasn't a great season. Great seasons are capped with championships, and Kansas City has had a number of those in the last few years. They have 3 during this Patrick Mahomes era and Andy Reid, and obviously what they've been able to put together is quite impressive. But at the end of the day, the Eagles wanted it more, and they went out there and proved it from the opening kickoff until the closing minutes. When they had the Gatorade shower and everything was over, certainly the Chiefs put in a couple touchdowns there at the end to make the score closer than the game actually was. But I just, it's been a great ride for the Chiefs. I don't necessarily think this is over. I think, the top 2 teams that really might have a chance again to have a Super Bowl rematch. It hasn't happened very often, but it has happened before. And it's quite possible we might be seeing, the Eagles and the Chiefs square off in Santa Clara next year for Super Bowl 60.
I absolutely agree. By the way, the Eagles have played in 5 Super Bowls. The first time they played the Patriots, they lost by 3 points. Then they got their revenge, 41-33. They lost 3 points to the Chiefs in Super Bowl 57. Got their revenge in 59. Now it's the Raiders. Our first Super Bowl loss was 44 years ago to the Raiders, 27-10 at New Orleans. And the Eagles were the favorites in that game against the Raiders. And like you said, Patrick, that year they had their worst game of the season at the wrong time. And it happens in professional football, in the Canadian Football League and the NFL. The best record in the regular season doesn't always translate into success in the playoffs. And that's why we love football and sports, because in the playoffs, especially football, one bad game and you're out. And that's why and Philadelphia's had their disappointments too.
Mm-hmm. It is. And that's the great thing about sports, right? Is a lot of times it does come down to one game, and sometimes just one play, can turn the result of a game and who comes out on top. And it's one of the things that we all love about sports, but also it's the same time maddening, because when your team doesn't win, you're crushed emotionally. But when they win, you just feel like you're on top of the world flying around, and it's great. So again, I have nothing but respect for the Philadelphia Eagles. That coaching staff, the defense, the offense, and even the special teams played very well. I mean, the game was never in doubt. The Eagles had that from start to finish. And it's just every team seems like every season, at least in the talking about the NFL here, every team always has one bad game during the season at some point where you're just kind of like,
Yep.
nah, what happened? You're scratching your head, and it could be the team where you're the best team playing the worst team, and the worst team any given Sunday, right? That's the slogan. That's the phrasing. And it really does. You have to come prepared every single time because the talent is pretty equal across the board. Sometimes there are some, definitive one team is better talent wise, but you still have to put it together for 60 minutes out on the field, 4 quarters. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do, now that we have a 17-game season 17 times. And then if you throw in additional postseason games, it's really hard to do that and not lay an egg one of those times. Every team has it. The Chiefs just picked the worst time to have their worst game of the year. And, again, when you got 126 million people watching, which seemed like that was what Fox Sports was saying afterwards, and NFL public relations, they were kind of sharing the audience size, which obviously was the most watched Super Bowl in history. To be able to see that one side, it was quite clear who's the best team in the league. And at the end of the day, end of the game, there was no doubt that the Eagles are the champions of Super Bowl 59 and certainly should be the favorites going into next season. There's going to be some turnover on both sides. I see a question there, certainly.
Yeah, Robby from Buffalo.
Yeah. And that's a great question, Robby. Travis Kelce obviously is a Hall of Famer. Whenever he does officially decide to hang it up, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer in Canton. It's obviously, there's going to be some debate on who is better, whether it's Gronkowski or Gonzalez or, Antonio Gates, who just got, is getting inducted, was just announced that he's going to be going into the Hall of Fame. There's a number of tight ends. Kellen Winslow historically kind of revamped what the tight end position and kind of reimagined what that was during the Don Coryell years with the San Diego Chargers when they were still in San Diego, obviously in the early 80s. The tight end position has become a weapon for many offenses. Dallas Goedert is an amazing tight end, and so in many ways, the Eagles have a ton of weapons. They, not only as wide receiver, you got obviously Saquon Barkley. In my opinion, he should have been the National League or National Football League MVP. It's not to take anything away necessarily from Josh Allen, who had an incredible year, Lamar Jackson, but in the grand scheme of things, we saw how important a running back can be in the game of football. And it feels like as the NFL became more of a passing league, running backs were kind of second thoughts. They were kind of put on the back burner as they aren't really as important anymore. And as you see, you can still win a championship with a strong running game and a powerful, running back. Obviously, an all-time talent, Saquon Barkley getting the all-time, season yardage record for a running back in NFL history, surpassing the great Terrell Davis, with the Broncos. So in many ways, that the Eagles team is loaded. Jalen Hurts, he doesn't get all of the credit like a Patrick Mahomes or necessarily
Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, a Joe Burrow. All those guys are great. And there are a lot of really great, talented quarterbacks right now. There are a lot of teams still searching for that superstar, but those that have found it, they're very blessed and very lucky and fortunate at this point, because if you have a great quarterback, it can help lead you places and just, you overcome a lot of hurdles. Even if you may not have the most talented team, if you have one of the best quarterbacks, you always give yourself a chance every game. And that's what it ultimately comes down to, is if you got a chance, I think most fans would take that. Hey, this is my quarterback. This is my signal caller. This is what we're going to do. This is how this is going to go. I like our chances. And Jalen Hurts has been to 2 Super Bowls in his short career, and he's a Super Bowl winner now. And he's played well, and he's played great in both games. Absolutely.
He definitely, even though Mahomes and the Chiefs won that first matchup, he very well could have been the Super Bowl MVP. And I don't think there really would have been much argument, even from other Chiefs fans. We would have been disappointed, but the fact is he played very well. And he did so again. The Chiefs defense really, in most instances, for all intents and purposes, shut down Saquon Barkley. The most he had been shut down the entire year.
Yeah,
and
57 yards.
Hey, that's gonna lead to victory. Well, nope. They dared Jalen Hurts to beat him with his arm, and he did. He made every pass he needed to. He just made plays when the situation called for it, and that's all you can ask for when you're in crunch time and you're in the Super Bowl. Any game, but let alone the Super Bowl, the world's biggest stage. And the Chiefs' defense is nothing to sneeze about.
Very good defense.
Pretty good defense. It may not have been as great overall, top to bottom, like the Eagles defense. And obviously we saw that on full display Every time the Chiefs offense had the ball, the Eagles just essentially shut down. And they did it without really blitzing. There wasn't a blitz. It was a 4-man front that Vic Fangio, who prior to this game, it was 0-8 against Mahomes. Mahomes had never lost to a Vic Fangio defense. And so in many ways, I think there was an overconfidence. I can admit I had that too. I'm like, there's no way he's going to lose. Mahomes had never lost in an indoor stadium, when the dome was, roof was closed in a stadium. He had been 15-0 to that point. So there were a number of things that I think we kind of, as Chiefs fans relied on, like, oh, they'll just find a way to get it done because they had been doing it all season. We knew there were weaknesses. We knew there were problems. We knew this wasn't a perfect team. We knew this probably wasn't the Chiefs' best team that they've had in this Super Bowl run. But we thought they've done it enough. They know how to do it. And there's that air of confidence that, comes when you've continually come through in the clutch. And I think this was a good wake-up call that you can't rely on that. Every game it's in and of itself a new game, and you have to approach it that way. And congratulations to Nick Sirianni and the Eagles. They're the champions, and they proved it. And you can't be upset. You can be disappointed as a Chiefs fan, but you're not and sad, because anytime you lose in the Super Bowl, it's sad, for your team. But it also makes you appreciate whenever your team does win, how sweet that moment is, and make sure to enjoy it, because if you've been on the other side of it, you know how painful it is. So it's, again, as Chiefs fans, we can do nothing but say, hey, congratulations. You guys played an incredible game. You deserved it. And, now you guys get to wear the target. The target's on your back as Eagles fans.
Absolutely.
And the Eagles next season. The Chiefs have had that on their back squarely for the last couple of years. And I think you saw a little bit of that kind of, grind on some of the players when, if you've seen Travis Kelce's latest podcast with him and his brother, he talked a little bit he addressed a little bit. There's some things that he's going to talk about later. He hasn't made his decision on retirement. Certainly, I think, Travis has earned the right to take his time to make the best decision for him. I do think now, had the Chiefs won that game, I think it would have been an automatic, hey, I'm out. He would have said, hey, peace, it's been great, I'm good to go. I think the competitor that he is as much of a grind as it was and tiring as it was for him, and some of the other players that have been, in this run, essentially you've played an additional season of playoff games. When you talk about how the 2 or 3 games each playoff, the last 7 years when you're going to the AFC Championship game, that's essentially another season on top of that. And this is a very physical sport. This is a physically demanding sport, the game of football. And, the bodies are only meant to hold up to a certain amount. And at some point, their bodies are going to start telling them, hey, we got to take a break, or, hey, maybe I'm done, But I think he's a competitor. I think he's going to think this through and do what's best for him. Travis's, off-field pursuits are going to be there whenever he does officially retire, whether it's this offseason or in another year, another 2 years, whatever he feels is best for him. That's the decision he's going to make. I think, hopefully some pluses in the column of maybe he might come back is just, Clark Hunt, the Chiefs owner, last week confirmed that Andy Reid's coming back to coach in 2025. Obviously, Andy's under contract for a few more years, but that's been kind of the underlying whisper. And on some folks in the media, we won't call out names. It's not you, Chris, believe me, don't worry. But there's some folks out there that like to kind of beat that drum every year, like, oh, Andy Reid's going to retire. And he never does. He comes back because he still
loves it. He's passionate about it.
He's passionate about it.
And who cares about his age? Who cares about his age?
Exactly. He's only 66,
yeah.
So he's older in the grand scheme of things compared to other coaches. But I mean, gosh, the Raiders just hired a 73-year-old coach, right? Pete Carroll to come back. So, I mean, if you love what you're doing and you're in good health, and by the way, when you got a talented quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, it just seems like, why walk away? And we know that Andy Reid's coming back. So we know that's set. We know Mahomes is under contract for a number of years.
What about Steve Spagnuolo?
I think ultimately, because you as an Eagles fan, you know how loyal Andy is to a lot of his assistants. And that's great to see, because you don't always get that in a sport, but sometimes change is needed. Sometimes it's nice to bring in some new coordinators and shake that up a little bit. Your coaching staff, Andy will never necessarily push somebody out the door, but it has to be more on the side of the coordinator to want to leave, or the coach to want to move to another opportunity. The Chiefs have been very fortunate that Steve Spagnuolo and Dave Toub, and even from an offensive coordinator side of things, obviously with Matt Nagy now, Eric Bieniemy before him, a lot of those opportunities, those guys kind of stay until they move on. And in many ways, I think the defensive scheme wasn't necessarily the problem. I think it was more so just they got to get a few more horses on the defensive side. They got to beef up the defensive line a little bit.
It starts with line play, offensive line and defensive line. It starts with both of them
in the trenches. Yeah. That's where you win and lose a game. That's where you win and lose championships. And the Chiefs have won championships that way in the past. Their defense and offensive lines were not as solid this year, and the Eagles exploited that from start to finish. And it was painful to see if you're a Chiefs fan, but if you're an Eagles fan, you kind of knew that. You saw that building all season. And so in many ways, that kind of instilled some confidence going into that game. And, again, you hope when it comes to a Super Bowl matchup that the teams are going to be, play a good game. And this just happened to be one of those that it wasn't a good game. I guess another silver lining for the Chiefs, if you can kind of look at it, we're almost 72 hours out after the game now. Just the fact that when it was an embarrassment in Super Bowl 55, where Tom Brady and the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs, and because the Chiefs' offensive line was awful again that game, Patrick Mahomes was running for his life, making Superman throws all day, and the Chiefs receivers, it was hitting them in the hands, hitting them in the face mask, and they were just dropping it. It was the similar kind of thing where he was under pressure all game, and the Chiefs, were soundly beaten, and it was because of a weak offensive line. Well, Brett Veach, the general manager for the Chiefs, that offseason, he turns around, and that's where he ends up drafting Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith and signs Joe Thuney as a free agent away from the Patriots and essentially rebuilt the offensive line. And as a result, you saw the Chiefs make 3 additional Super Bowls in the following years. And so I think it's a wake-up call for Brett Veach. He's really is, one of the top general managers. I think him, Howie Roseman, for the Eagles, there's a few others that are really, really good, really talented. He's got a tough task ahead of him. He's going to, this team is not running it back now. I think it was a bad enough loss that it's going to force the Chiefs to make some changes. It's going to force Brett Veach to make some moves. That was, when things just aren't coming out, the Chiefs' expectation now is Super Bowl or bust. And there are very few teams that have that high level of expectation each season, but Kansas City's there. And as long as Patrick Mahomes is there, and Andy Reid's there, that should be the realistic expectation for fans. As crazy as that sounds, a few years ago, we could have only envisioned, hey, we'll just be happy with 1 Super Bowl. And here we are, 5 Super Bowls in 6 years kind of thing. And Mahomes knows nothing but AFC championship games. The worst season he's ever had has been losing in overtime twice in the AFC championship game. First to the Patriots, Tom Brady, and then Joe Burrow in the Bengals. So, the Chiefs' level of success, it feels like, the dynasty is still there. The Chiefs have their work cut out for them. It's the Patriots dynasty eventually, went away, and as all dynasties do. But in the level of free agency, the era of free agency,
it's hard.
It's hard. It's hard to get back. It really is. So the fact that the Chiefs were able to, be the first team that had won 2 consecutive Super Bowls and then actually make it back to the Super Bowl, because no other team, the farthest any of the other teams had ever gotten, advanced was the conference championship game where they lost. Yep. So I guess in a way that the Chiefs, did better in that regard, taking a step back. But what people remember is they remember the losses, right? They remember the Super Bowl loss. They're going to remember this loss. That Mahomes and the Chiefs had a chance to three-peat. The first professional, North American sports team to three-peat,
since 1980,
since the Lakers, actually, Kobe and Shaq with in the NBA, and obviously for that. Yeah.
I was going to say the last professional football team to win 3 in a row. I know some people in the States don't accept this, not you, but the CFL, the Edmonton Eskimos or Elks, they won 5 in a row from 1978 to 82. And no CFL team, I know there's only 9 teams, no CFL team has won more than 2 in a row since then. That shows you, even in Canada, in the CFL, how hard it is to three-peat in any sports. Look at baseball. The only team I've seen in the last 3 decades to win 3 in a row was the Yankees. 98, 99, and 2000. So
it's hard to do.
It's absolutely, in any sport.
It is. And, especially when you've got a sport like the NFL where parity reigns, right? Every season, it's meant to be as equal as possible, to give as many teams opportunities to win. And so it really goes against the grain when the Chiefs are, winning, getting to the championship game. And the only way you get to the Super Bowl is by getting to the championship game first, right? There are a lot of these steps that you kind of have to take. And Mahomes, it's astounding that he knows nothing but championship games. And obviously, you know, that can spoil you as a fan, but you have to kind of remind yourself this isn't normal. And, you know, I think the discussion for, you know, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady is the GOAT until he's not, right?
Yeah.
I think it is a little too early to necessarily say, oh, that argument's over for good because Brady was 3-2 his first 5 Super Bowls. Mahomes is now 3-2. And then essentially but in terms of somebody, a player in their 20s, it's hard to surpass what Patrick Mahomes has accomplished in his 20s, you know, his age,
Yep.
20 age, you know, as an NFL quarterback. It's hard to surpass that. Is he going to keep that longevity? Is he going to keep that level of success to try and chase down Brady? Who knows? Time will tell. There's a lot of things that come into play. My gut feeling is that Patrick Mahomes will not play till he's 45 years old like Tom Brady did. I just don't see Mahomes. I can see Mahomes maybe another 10 to 12 years, and then he'll probably call it a career. Hey, he's a Hall of Famer now if he decided to retire tomorrow, you know. Hope to goodness he doesn't, you know. And I don't think he obviously won't, but, you know, it's going to make him a better quarterback. This disastrous performance, it's made Brady a better quarterback when he comes back from, you know, disastrous performances. Yep. He's never had a disastrous Super Bowl, but he's had disastrous playoff performances before. And the next year he came back, you know, and it's, you know, the Giants stunned the Patriots and kept the Patriots from having a perfect season, and the Eagles, you know, just destroyed the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59 and kept that, you know, prevented a three-peat. So in many ways, I know fans will be really happy, NFL fans that aren't Chiefs fans, that, oh, thank goodness it's not the Chiefs anymore, you know. And hey, that's great. Again, like I said, the target can be on your guys' backs now moving forward.
You know, it's funny, Patrick. The Patriots, when they won their first Super Bowl in 2001, everybody was so happy. Oh, this laughingstock franchise finally won a Super Bowl. We're happy for them. Then the Patriots won 2, 3, and then over the decades, they became the heroes to the villains. And then when the Patriots dynasty was ending, Kansas City's like the good guys. Everybody's like, go Chiefs, go Mahomes, Andy Reid. And then the Chiefs win 1 Super Bowl, 2 Super Bowls, 3. Then they become the villains, just like with the Eagles. Let's say the Eagles win again next year and have the same amount of success as the Chiefs or similar, they're going to be hated as well, because, you know, sports fans, after a while, fans get tired of the same team winning all the time. But it happens where you become the heroes to villains, and that's what happened with Kansas City. The Buffalo Bills in the 90s at the end of their I know they didn't win the Super Bowl, but at the end of their Super Bowl run, people were tired of them and they were cheering against the Bills.
Yeah. And I remember when they won that 4th AFC title game, you know, championship, where it went, you know, the Super Bowl, and it was a rematch with the Cowboys. You know, it was Jim Kelly, and I remember seeing Andre Reed and Thurman Thomas on the sideline. We're back. You know, it was kind of one of those things where everyone was kind of like, oh no, it's the Bills again, you know. But it was an amazing accomplishment. Obviously, you know, you would have thought they would have pulled one out of, you know, the 4 in a row. There were a couple games that were not necessarily close, and there were a couple that were, that could have gone either way, and obviously went against Buffalo. But you can't take away anything from the success. I mean, you see the amount of Hall of Famers that came from the Bills teams there in the 90s. Excuse me. You know, you're seeing the Hall of Fame, you know, with the Patriots, and you're going to see in a few years, you're going to start to see, you know, some of these Chiefs players, when they do retire, ultimately, they're going to start seeing them filter their way and work their way on into Canton, Ohio, because that's just what happens with dynasties. When you win titles, that seems to be what's the automatic ticket for a lot of these players. And they're obviously great players, and many of them probably would have gone to the Hall of Fame anyway. But having that Super Bowl ring, having that, you know, that accomplishment, it just feels like that really helps you punch your ticket and get you into immortality.
I feel if Jalen Hurts can lead the Eagles to another Super Bowl win and win another Super Bowl MVP, I think he's already going to be in the Hall of Fame, because I already think he surpassed Donovan McNabb, because in 4 years he's taken the team to 2 Super Bowls, won 2 NFC championship games, and he's played great in both Super Bowls. And this year he was able to beat the Chiefs with his legs too. The Chiefs did a great job on Saquon Barkley, but Barkley still had 97 yards, 57 rushing, 41 receiving, but Saquon Barkley also pass protected well. If you saw some of the blitzes, if it wasn't for Saquon Barkley pass protecting, Jalen Hurts might have been sacked or not got that ball off in an efficient manner. So I think Saquon Barkley might not have had his best game statistically, credit to Kansas City, but he did everything well in that game. And everyone doesn't realize too, a running back pass protection is huge for a quarterback.
It's huge. And you saw it on the Kansas City side, right? The pass protection wasn't there. It wasn't there when you're chipping with a tight end, when you've got the running back coming in to kind of, make that stop. It just wasn't enough. And give credit to the Eagles, right? Their talent evaluation and being able to put together a four-man front that said, we're going to beat your five up front. And they did. They beat them. It was amazing. It was beautiful. If again, you're, an Eagles fan, it was all you could have dreamed of. And it was a nightmare for Chiefs fans. And
I was also hearing this from WGR. I don't want to mention the guy, I respect him, but he's like, oh, the Eagles only got good because of all their high draft picks, but the Eagles have been in the playoffs 7 out of 8 years. And they've also been in 3 Super Bowls in the last 7 years. When you're in that many Super Bowls over 7 years, you're not going to get high draft picks. The Eagles did, when they traded Carson Wentz, they used those draft picks to get Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. Both of them should have been in the first round. Jalen Carter was a first-round pick, but 9th overall. He could have gone number 1. So, yeah, the Eagles have had a little bit of luck, but they've also done a great job in accumulating draft picks and scouting the guys and getting guys that fit in there. And for Mitchell and DeJean, rookie cornerbacks, to do this good as a first year, that's unheard of.
And DeJean, it was, Mahomes, again, we kind of, touched on it, that he played his worst game. But I'll tell you what, Cooper DeJean, happy birthday to him, right? That's a birthday he's never going to forget, being able to pick off his first NFL interception, right? And happened to be in the Super Bowl, and it's a pick 6 on Patrick Mahomes. He'll never, he's going to hold on to that ball forever. It's not going anywhere. It's going to stay in his possession. And he should enjoy that. Obviously he's got a bright career ahead of him, bright future. But he put it together, and those were the 14 points that really turned the game. And it was all Philly's. It was Philadelphia's momentum, and it was their game after that. Mahomes just, he had done pretty well the second half of the season. He stopped turning the ball over, stopped throwing interceptions, stopped making mistakes, and lo and behold, he was trying to be Superman again. And I don't know exactly who he was throwing to. He may have gotten hit as he was throwing the ball, and that knocked it off a little bit. But I'll tell you what, Cooper DeJean was there, ran it back. And the Chiefs offense, you're thinking, oh, clearly they're going to push him out. They're going to stop. Nope. He goes right on into the end zone and scores. And then that other interception that Mahomes had inside the 14.
Zach Bond, who they got from the Saints. They got him. He was a special teams player with the Saints. Howie Roseman saw something in him. And now it's like, I'm hoping the Eagles pay him and keep him. He's like their leader of their defense with Brandon Graham. I don't think Brandon Graham will be back, but it was nice to see Brandon Graham come back from that injury and get another Super Bowl ring. 15 years with the Philadelphia Eagles, and 5 of them have multiple rings. Nobody in the city of Philadelphia has 2 championship rings since the 1970s Flyers, who won back-to-back Stanley Cups in 74, 75.
Yeah. He should never have to buy a drink in the city of Philadelphia ever again. Right? These are the type of things that fans are going to remember, and hopefully, and I hope they've enjoyed the moment. I really, truly do, because a lot of times, in the past, it's hard to enjoy it. You're so kind of caught up and stressed out about the game, and it's so intense. But I hope everyone's been able to enjoy it, because it's just something to behold, to watch it. And the Eagles are just a loaded team. A lot of time, everyone was saying, they were probably the most talented team, and the most talented team that day in New Orleans won on the field. And again, like we said, that doesn't always happen, but it happened on Sunday. And it left no doubt who the best team in the NFL is, certainly for the 2024 season. And as we go into 25, they definitely should be the favorite, and they are. It looks like, that's, one of the great things about, a champion is you get kind of that momentum going into next season. And, certainly the Eagles, Kellen Moore, as the offensive coordinator, getting the head coach job down in New Orleans, obviously he earned it. He put together an offensive scheme and a plan all season long. It was no accident that the Eagles won. There was a lot of hard work and effort that they put on. It was an interesting start to the season when they were down there, in South America, and they get one of the first international games to start the season, a hard way to go. But, they struggled a little bit, and then they just put it together. And they won 16 out of their last 17 games. You talk about momentum. It matters in sports. When you start doing the right thing, winning, just like losing can, kind of spiral, winning is the same thing. You just kind of get that momentum and it's like, you just move forward with it. And they did, they moved forward. They went all the way through to the Super Bowl. They, in many ways, I know I kind of joke, you and I, obviously talk about sports, we're sports fans, but I liken it a little bit to the Rocky movie, right? Rocky 3, where it was Clubber Lang. And I kind of envision, I kind of look back and I'm thinking maybe the Chiefs acted a little like Rocky Balboa, who was living the good life at that point, right? Kind of like,
yes,
I'm focused, I'm distracted, this is great.
Yeah.
Not that the Chiefs were distracted, but certainly you look back and you kind of think there could have been a possibility to have some of that hunger. Just, was it still there? Obviously it was, because they got to the Super Bowl, but it felt like in many ways they kind of were so focused on beating Buffalo in the championship game that maybe that was the peak for them. Emotionally, they were just kind of spent, because they certainly did not seem like the team that we had seen all season with the fight that they had, even when they were down, to come back and keep it close. You just didn't see that at any point during the game. Obviously, it worked. They got some, garbage time touchdowns and made the score a lot closer than it was. But again, you kind of go back to the Rocky 3. Clubber Lang worked hard and just took it to Rocky and beat him for his title. Obviously the movie turns, that they rematched later and whatnot, but it just felt very much kind of that Rocky Balboa connection that the Eagles have. And I felt like that felt appropriate when we take a look back, that the Chiefs kind of had the success. They had beaten Buffalo. Okay, great. We're back. And they just seemed out of sorts from start to finish. Obviously most of that credit goes to the Eagles, but it does make it as we've had some time now and we continue to go to the off season. It's a long off season. But you look back and you think, what could they have done differently? What can they do next season? What do they need to do to rebuild? The Chiefs only have 6 draft picks coming up in the draft. And, luckily 3 of those are in the first 66 picks, so you do have the ability to get some good talent. It's going to require, some smart decisions on who's going to come back. There's a number of free agents. There's some players that are due for extensions. There's some that you may not be able to bring back. And does Brett Veach make a shocking deal like he did a few years ago when trading Tyreek Hill away? Is there a sign and trade like the Chiefs did with L'Jarius Sneed with Tennessee, recently? Is that something they possibly could do with Trey Smith at guard? Obviously Trey Smith's going to have a lot of, be a very popular offensive line, potential to add to somebody's teams. There's a lot of teams that would love to have him, and the Chiefs just can't pay everybody. And that's the reality of success is, you pay a few folks and those are kind of your cornerstones. Chris Jones on the defense for the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes for the, on the offensive side of things. You just can't pay everybody at every position. And so you have to learn how to, kind of fill in and supplement and through free agency in the draft. And again, I have full confidence that Brett Veach is going to work his magic. He always does. There's no question about that. But again, it just, it's just a reminder that a new season comes new challenges. And in many ways, that's the Eagles are going to go through that as well. All the other teams, the Lions are going to go through that. They've got some, question mark with both of their coordinators and so many coaches leaving their staff. How can they, how can they respond in 25? What does it look like for Buffalo and Baltimore? What does it look like for the Bengals? Are they going to be able to keep both of their top receivers? So there are a lot of questions that are still to be answered. And, obviously, here at the end of this month, you've got everybody there in Indianapolis for the combine. And then, you start to have workouts and stuff during the month of March. And then the draft is in April, right?
In Green Bay,
so, yeah. So it's an off season, but there's really not a lot of downtime unless your team didn't make the playoffs. If your team had a good run in the postseason, you kind of take a few weeks to kind of catch your breath and then you kind of move on to the next season.
Before I let you go in a few minutes, Patrick, I know at the time I was upset as an Eagle fan when the Eagles fired Andy Reid, but I think it was the best thing that ever happened to Andy Reid, not because he wasn't a great coach in Philadelphia. It's like Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. I really feel Tomlin is now become like Andy Reid was in Philadelphia. It's time for a change. Not that he was a bad coach. It's just it was the best thing to ever happen to Andy Reid going to Kansas City. And the Eagles, obviously, Chip Kelly was a failure, but they ended up bringing Doug Peterson in. They brought in Nick Sirianni. I know I was on Sirianni for last year's meltdown and earlier this year, but Nick Sirianni now, I don't think his contract's up. The Eagles have to give him a long-term contract. 4 years in Philadelphia, 54 wins, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl championship, 4 playoff appearances in a row, 2 division titles. He's done such a great job with his team, and obviously Andy Reid, it's just that move for Andy Reid was the best thing to happen to him and obviously the Eagles. And I feel Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, still a very good coach. I feel Tomlin needs a change too.
I think you're right. Chris, a change of scenery can be good for people, sometimes. Obviously, Mike Tomlin's, obviously a Super Bowl winning coach, going to go down as one of the best coaches in NFL history, even one of the best Steeler coaches. And obviously, you got Chuck Noll there, so there's some competition for that. But in terms of consistency, he just doesn't lose. He hasn't necessarily had as much success in the postseason recently, but the fact is his teams are, compete every single game, every single week, and every single year they find themselves at least in the playoffs, right? And a lot of times that's what I remember about the 90s in the Chiefs run is that, the Chiefs were in the playoffs every year. Now, they didn't have a lot of success at the time, but you can't win a title unless you get to the postseason. And so in many ways, I think there's, probably from the ownership of the Steelers, there's probably some, hey, if we make a change, who are we going to get that's going to get us here or keep us at least so this is our baseline. We don't lose. We don't have losing seasons. But is that going to get you to where you need to be to take that step to get another championship, to get that 7th Super Bowl for the city of Pittsburgh? Mike Tomlin is going to end up okay. I'm a little bit surprised that he didn't decide to make a change. But I also can respect the fact that he wants to continue on in Pittsburgh. He has not had a lot of recent success, but he knows how the players respond to him. He's a player's coach. Like he knows how to lead men and a lot of teams struggle with that. There's very few teams that have a coach that has a culture and has developed it. And this is what we do. This is our system. This is how it works. You mentioned Andy Reid had the success in Philadelphia, but it just kind of felt like it was a little stale. He ended up going to had one bad season. Philadelphia said, hey, let's make a change. And ultimately it worked out for them because since then they've gotten 2 Super Bowls, right? And it worked out for Andy Reid because he got Super Bowls as well, Yep. So it worked out for both sides. And in many ways you kind of wonder, what opportunities are out there. Just like starting quarterbacks, a good starting quarterback's hard to find. A good head coach is hard to find. And, it'll be interesting to see, with the changes and the new coaches, how that works. Some of the teams that, got coaches this year, obviously with Marty Schottenheimer, his son, Brian, taking over in Dallas, that'll be interesting to see how that works out. Jerry Jones, I think as we've kind of, communicated over the years is certainly a very hands-on owner, more so than most. Is that an environment that's going to, ultimately lead to another title? And I'm like you, I kind of think a lot of fans are that way. Even Cowboy fans are like, I don't know if this is it. I don't know if this is the answer. I think they may have to struggle until Jerry finally, hands off and empowers somebody else to be the general manager and kind of run things and let him sit back and watch. But that's just not his personality. He has to be very hands-on. And I think you see some of that. But then you see, the example of the Eagles and the Chiefs, obviously the owners that aren't quite as hands-on, obviously very supportive, very aware of what's going on and very much plugged in, but they empower their staff and their team to do their job. And as you've seen, the Chiefs have gotten 3 Super Bowls and the Eagles have gotten 2 in the last number of years. And that's not a coincidence. That's a setup of a great ownership structure, a great coaching, great general managers, great staff, great players, being able to put all that together. And it's hard to do. A lot of places just don't do it. And the fact that your Eagles and my Chiefs have been able to do that the last few years, it's just made football really fun. I know that for sure.
Ownership. The Patriots were in that situation too when they weren't winning the Super Bowls. Robert Kraft stayed out of it and let Bill Belichick and the other guys run it. And that's why the Chiefs are successful, because the Hunt family stays out of it. And the Eagles, Jeffrey Lurie bought the team 30 years ago. They only been to 1 Super Bowl and they weren't doing very good. And he's the one that brought in Andy Reid. He's basically been the greatest owner in Eagles history. They've been around since 1933, and Lurie in 30 years has gotten the Eagles to 4 Super Bowls, 2 championships, and a number of division titles. I think since 2000, they've been to 20 playoff games. I think they're ahead of Kansas City with 18 wins, and I think New England's got 19. So since he's been the owner of the Eagles the last 30 years, they have been one of the most consistent franchises in the National Football League, just like the Kansas City Chiefs have been for the last decade. It starts with ownership and management.
It does. And that's why I honestly think, it's the next handful of years, it's going to be, the Chiefs competing in the AFC, and in the NFC, it's going to be the Eagles. Now, it's not to say there aren't going to be challengers. Seeing Jaden Daniels, what he did for the Commanders this season, if they can have a heck of a draft and make some good decisions on the free agency side of things, the Commanders are going to be right there. And the fact that they're division rivals makes that even more interesting. Of what that's going to look like. A lot of times, divisional rivals, there may be a superior team, as the Patriots were, as the Bills have been in the AFC East over the years. Recently, you've got those teams that kind of like there's one team, but it doesn't matter because it's a divisional rival. You play each other so much, each side knows each other, that a lot of times those are more competitive games than even those we only see this team once every so often. You see that a little bit, right? You see that. And the fact is that, it'll just be interesting to see how that works out. It really will be, because you've got challengers. It'll be interesting again to see what the Lions do. What is Green Bay going to do? What is Minnesota going to do? Is Sam Darnold going to walk and go to another one and they go with McCarthy as their quarterback? That was kind of the plan before the injury. They're probably going to follow through on that plan because they spend so much money on certain positions like wide receiver. And again, rightfully so. He's an incredible talent. And the receiving core that they've got there, they're superstar wide receivers. So the fact with the Vikings. And so you kind of wonder what's that going to look like? What's Sean McVay going to do? What is it going to look like with the Rams? Are they going to hold on? Are they going to make some changes? We know Cooper Kupp's out the door. He's already announced he's going to be going. Does Stafford stick around? Does he kind of rework his deal and or does he say, hey, I'm out too? If you're going to, if this is
I think he's coming back. And I'll be honest, out of the 4 games the Eagles played in the playoffs, obviously they played a good Green Bay team. They played Washington. They played Kansas City. But the Rams game to me was the most difficult because Stafford at the end of the game they were 20
He was moving that ball.
He was moving that ball. And if it wasn't for Jalen Carter sacking him and making it a 4th and 11, they possibly could have won that game. No disrespect to the Chiefs or the Commanders or the Packers, but I find the Rams pushed the Eagles more than any other team in this playoffs.
Well, and McVay's an offensive genius, right? I mean, he kind of gets that reputation, but you see it. And anytime anybody questions that, you see games like that, like you just spoke of, and you're like, what? Who's behind that? Well, it's Sean McVay. That's who he is. He's one of those minds that kind of makes that work. And historically, Andy Reid has been that, but you didn't see it didn't feel like you saw any corrections in the Super Bowl. You saw that the line was struggling. You saw that the pass protection was tough. There weren't any like, hey, let's try and run the ball a little bit. Let's make a commitment to that to give Patrick a breather a little bit. He's getting crushed back there. Let's try and move the ball and see if we at least can't make that second down, third down a little bit shorter, as opposed to making it second, third and long the whole time and knowing that the pass is coming. And I mean, they only ran the ball 11 times the entire game, the Chiefs. And you would have thought with a line that just was not holding anybody. I mean, they couldn't do anything. It was just like leaks everywhere. And you would have thought that maybe they would have changed that up a little bit at halftime, but you really didn't see that. The only time you saw the offense start to get into a groove was there at the end when, Philadelphia had some of their backups and the game was well in hand at that point, But I do think, again, you see somebody like a Xavier Worthy.
He's definitely a star. Definitely a star.
That was that missing deep weapon, that deep threat, right? When they traded Tyreek Hill, it was like, who's going to do what in the offense? And the Chiefs never had that. But I think the fact that you've seen the entire maturation and growth of Xavier Worthy, that he's had to play a number of positions this year, that he kind of developed as a wide receiver. He has a route tree now. He has some of these things and skills other than this guy that's just, hey, throw it deep, I'm going to run. I saw that first deep bomb that Mahomes, I was up at the game in Inglewood, the Chiefs and Chargers game at the end of September, and that was beautiful to see. It was fun. But you never really saw that again the rest of the season because the offensive line just could not hold up. And so you really didn't see that until, again, the very end of the game, and it was that 50-yard touchdown bomb with just, a minute or two left, 2 minutes left in the game that Worthy caught. But you're like, that's what's been missing from the Chiefs offense. If they can incorporate that back into it, they've got Rashee Rice coming back from injury next year. Obviously, there will likely be a suspension of some capacity for him for his off-season activities last year. That's still been kind of in limbo as to what that's going to look like. But you're going to have a Rashee Rice. You've got Xavier Worthy. If Travis Kelce comes back, you can kind of, do a little bit of load management there, or make sure you've got your drafting or bringing up a new tight end to kind of have, Kelce kind of coach him this year, and then know that Kelce's going to be out the door very soon afterwards. But let's try and impart this knowledge to somebody else. You'll never replace a Travis Kelce. You're never going to replace somebody like that. but the offense can evolve and grow and hopefully rely more on the receivers, because that's how most offenses are. It's been highly unusual that the Chiefs have kind of made, Travis Kelce, certainly in many ways, he's like a star wide receiver. But the fact was he was still ultimately a tight end. And a lot of offenses that you see, Eagles as well, Lions, that you were seeing these high octane offenses, is that you've got to have that receiving core that's solid. You've got to have more than just one person in case somebody goes down. You need 2, 3, 4 wide receivers that you can kind of pick from and choose from and rely on at any point. And when you got somebody like Mahomes, if you can give him a little bit of time to throw, he's going to find somebody. And the Chiefs need to get back to that. Are they going to be completely that high octane offense that we saw scoring 35, 40 points a game every single week when Mahomes first started? Maybe not, but they need to get back to that being part of their options, those options that we're seeing game in and game out. And we just haven't seen that the last 3 years in Kansas City. They were able to get 2 Super Bowls out of it, and it worked out well. But as we saw, everything that they had been working, they have to reinvent themselves, right? That's how it works in life. That's how it works in sports. Is if you
setbacks. Sometimes you need, like the Eagles last year, they started out 10-1. I thought Super Bowl, and then they lost 6 out of the last 7, and then they got put out by Tampa. Nick Sirianni even said that was the best thing to happen to the Eagles last year. Obviously, not the meltdown, but the learning experience from it, and the year before losing that Super Bowl by 3 points to the Chiefs. Sometimes you have to have a setback to learn from it to go forward.
Absolutely. That's in sports, that's in life a lot of times too. You have setbacks and you learn from it. What can you take from it and what can you do better? And then you're going to have success, but you just can't quit. You just can't give up. And the Eagles didn't give up, and they're champions now as a result of it. The Chiefs have had a setback. They've had a major setback. They can't act like, oh, we'll just bring everybody back again next year. That's not an option. It was a decisive enough defeat that they will be forced to make changes, and they will. I have no doubt that they'll be right back there in contention. The great thing, Chris, is that it's the regular season is just around the corner. It'll be in there in the fall, and one of the scheduling quirks is that the Chiefs and Eagles will play each other in Kansas City again in the 2025 season. So I can almost guarantee that's probably going to be a national TV game at some point. Obviously, the schedule will be determined later this spring when they announce the games of what the dates are going to look like. But certainly on the schedule, the Eagles visit Arrowhead. So we know that's going to be an incredible game, a rematch for the Super Bowl. So,
I believe the Bills and Chiefs are playing again, and then the Lions are in Lincoln Financial Field. So
it'll be great. It'll be great. And it's just, there's going to be so many great regular season matchups that the nice thing about it for you guys is the Eagles get to kick off the season, right? When you're the champion, you're the first game, and everybody gets to watch. And so it'll be a lot of fun. You'll see the Eagles on a lot of primetime games. The same thing that everyone was annoyed seeing the Chiefs the last 2-3 seasons where everything was nationally televised. That's what the Eagles are going to be. That's the benefit of being the champion.
Absolutely. And before we let you go, Patrick, the NFL draft's coming up in April in Green Bay. I would love to be there like I was last year in Detroit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Chiefs need to improve upon in the offseason, free agency and the draft. Salary cap, are they able to do some moves with free agency? And the NFL draft, would you work on the offense line? Is there the number one weakness with this team? The number one area, I shouldn't say weakness, but the number one area for next year?
I think so. I think, that was painfully obvious after watching Sunday night, is that the offensive line needs help. I think the only person you can truly count on is Creed Humphrey, the center. I think Joe Thuney will likely be extended because he has a salary cap number. He has like a year left on his contract with, in Kansas City. I think they'll probably adjust that a little bit so there's a little more salary cap space. They don't have, I think one of the teams I saw had like $124 million in cap space. The Chiefs don't have that, but they have enough where they will be active in making moves to adjust that. Brett Veach has done that. I think you may see this may be one of those years where Patrick Mahomes, agrees to redo his contract, rework his contract. So there's a little more flexibility depending on what happens with Travis Kelce, right? That's going to open up some space, or at least we know what, he's going to get. And he's earned every penny. So I'm never going to say Travis needs to renegotiate. He does not. For many years, he was severely underpaid as a tight end. He was never paid as the top tight end. So I'm okay with whatever he decides. Hopefully he comes back. The selfish part of me wants him to come back. I think man, that's a tough way to go when you kind of get your backside handed to you. Just the competitor in him, probably he will come back. But if he doesn't, that becomes an immediate area of need. My understanding is that this year's draft, 2025, offensive line isn't as strong as it's been in past drafts. So you're going to be able to find some people, but is that the ultimate answer? Who knows for sure? The Chiefs need to think about a tight end somewhere along the lines in the early rounds. I think one of the things that the Chiefs need to think about, even though they have Isaiah Pacheco, and obviously Kareem Hunt came and filled in admirably in Pacheco's absence when he was injured during the season, but the Chiefs need to figure out the running backs position. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was helpful at times, but I think when you spend a first-round draft pick on your running back, you expect that person to be something more in the mold of what a Saquon Barkley is. Obviously, there are very few Saquon Barkleys, but you expect the impact of what Saquon can provide for an offense. The Chiefs have been missing that essentially this entire run. They've kind of been this running back by committee, and I know Andy Reid has had success doing that, but I also remember some of his early teams in Philadelphia where they Deuce Staley and some of those guys, Westbrook, and they had some guys that were horses that they could rely on consistently. They're out there. They're not only running the ball, they're pass blocking, catching it out of the backfield. Like, you got to have a running back that can be on the field and can be powerful when they're out there, and really help if the offense is struggling on the pass game. You got a running game that hand it off and just road grade everybody. Just open up holes and let the running back run. And I think that's been missing a little bit. I think that's something that the Chiefs are going to have to look at. Don't wait till a free agency to try and get, running back. Don't undrafted free agent or somebody in the 7th round again. Pacheco was a 7th rounder, and that helped during that time period. But I can't see the Chiefs necessarily extending Pacheco. So you're going to have to look at possibly running back, definitely offensive line, offensive tackle being the focus, because you just can't. The 5 Super Bowls that the Chiefs have been in, they've had a different left tackle each time. And that's really hard when that's Mahomes' blind spot. That's the guy he relies on to be there to protect him every single time. And as we've seen, the 2 times that the Chiefs have really struggled in the Super Bowl, it's because the offensive line has been a patchwork. They're just trying to get through the game. And the other side, a strong defensive line will crush through a questionable offensive line every single time. And, so I think offensive tackle is probably going to be a focus, probably their 1st round pick. If not, it'll definitely be the 2nd or 3rd. They're going to address that situation. I think you need to address a running back at some point, something with the tight end. It's supposed to be a decent running back draft. It's supposed to be a decent tight end draft. So I feel like the Chiefs can probably pick somebody without necessarily having to trade up in the top 15, top 20 in the 1st round to make that happen, and they can still walk away with somebody. The Chiefs are going to have to look at linebacker, right? You've got Nick Bolton, who's a free agent. If you hang on to him, you've got Tranquil still there. You've got Leo Chenal, those guys are great, but they don't necessarily have the speed that you need sometimes when you have an offense that has a little more of a passing attack, something that really utilizes the tight ends. And the Chiefs, that was a weakness that the defense had this season. And we saw that in week 1, with Baltimore, that the tight end was just getting in and behind. And that was a weakness even in the Super Bowl. Dallas Goedert had a couple catches that you're just like, wow, we've seen that all season be a weakness for the Chiefs defense. So I think in many ways they've got some decisions to make. Justin Reed's a free agent. Do you bring him back in the secondary, or do you rely on Jalen Hicks, who was, they're one of their top picks in this year's draft as a rookie out of Washington State. He performed well the more time he got on the field. And I could envision, as I was seeing that happen, I'm thinking in my mind, that's probably a cap savings for the Chiefs if they don't bring back Reed. If Justin Reed wants to come back at a reduced rate, but if he's going to try and expect a top of the line contract, some of those guys are going to be walking. And that's what made the Patriots so good over the years, right? Is they had to make some of those tough decisions where you have free agents like, who do you bring back? Who's homegrown? Who do we want to really keep and invest? And can we go younger here that helps us with the cap and just reload? The Chiefs have been very good during this era, this Super Bowl run for them of drafting and working in secondary, corners, safeties, those kinds of things. So could they do that and go young there and maybe spend that money in a different position? Sure. I think the defensive line, the Chiefs need still a little bit of help. Chris Jones is great. Tershawn Wharton is a free agent. He had an incredible season. He had 6.5 sacks, during the regular season and made a couple stops in the Super Bowl. So is that somebody you bring back? But you need more than that. I think George Karlaftis was a great bookend for, Chris Jones on the other side of things. It was kind of Furious George is his nickname. And he really had an incredible season in terms of sack totals, but performance too. When Chris Jones is getting double teams, that opens up one-on-one for Karlaftis. they still need the pass rush, just still wasn't there, honestly, for the Chiefs this season. So I think they need to look at what they can do there in the draft. And if they can't do it in the draft, then they need to, sign a free agent and bring somebody else in. Because again, as you said, the Eagles, we know who the champions are, and we know where they're strong at, and we know where the Chiefs struggled against them. And that's what you now have to measure yourself against. You were kind of the measuring stick for everybody, and now you have to start to compare yourself to who's the best. And the top of the line is the Eagles right now, the offensive line, defensive line. Chiefs need to get stronger there. And the Chiefs need to do something on the receiving end of things. You got to give some weapons now to, I think, again, you got Rashee Rice, you got Xavier Worthy. Those guys are great on rookie contracts. Do you get another rookie? Do you supplement that with a veteran that, will be moving in the offseason? The Chiefs need to take advantage of that. And I think in many ways try to give, Patrick Mahomes some talent around him other than just Travis Kelce, and they can do that. They have the capacity to do that. They're going to have to be a little bit flexible on the cap space, but I think I saw they were like 21st overall in cap space. So they're not ideal, but they're obviously not over where they're going to have to make a bunch of cuts too. So I think, there's some work ahead for the front office, and the commitment is there from the ownership. That we got the coaches coming back. I would be okay if Matt Nagy, the offensive coordinator, decided to move on and maybe they brought in a fresh face or somebody else there. I don't know that that's going to happen because historically that's not an Andy Reid thing, is pushing anybody out the door, but you just never know. It never hurts to have some fresh eyes sometimes on the offensive side of things. Andy Reid, I think, was a little too pass happy, and I thought we're going to do it my way, and he was a little too stubborn in the Super Bowl. He doesn't do that very often, but I've seen that in games before. I think I saw it a handful of times in Philadelphia, but I've noticed that there's been some times in San Diego or here in Kansas City, when there's been a little bit of a struggle with that, where Andy's like, nope, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be stubborn about it. And it doesn't work out. And you're like, Andy, you are you're a legend, but you got to make some adjustments. Like sometimes as a fan, it feels like they're not making adjustments. And so I think we saw a little bit of that in the game. Again, 11 rushes in a game where the pass, you can't, there's no pass blocking. So run the doggone ball. The offensive line can run. You've got that interior that's still there. Just run the ball, at least help yourself a little bit. And they just couldn't stop the bleeding. And it was, it was a rout from start to finish. It got up 24-zip at halftime. They went up 31, and then you just were like, this thing's over.
Too much.
It's over.
But even when I'm going to be honest, even when it was 34-0, I was like, come on, Eagles, keep scoring. Not to like be a poor sportsman and run up the score on you guys, but I was like, Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs, I don't want to see a comeback, because look what New England did against Atlanta, up 28-3. I was like, and the Eagles didn't let their foot off the gas pedal until 5 minutes left in the game, when it was pretty well over. But to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, you can't be in a close game with them. The Eagles saw that. The Eagles saw that 2 years ago when it was a close game, and they blew a 10-point lead in that game too. The Eagles, I think, learned from that, and they learned to make sure to keep their foot on the gas pedal. You can't let a team like Kansas City or when it was New England to come back and like I said, Patrick, I want to say thank you so much for coming on tonight. I know it was so very short notice, and I really apologize. It's been almost 3.5 years since you've been on my show.
It's been a while, but I appreciate it. I've been able to watch your show. You've continued to grow and evolve, and this show has become great to see. It's been great to see your development. It's been great to see the guests, the lineups that you've had, the discussions that you've had with so many people, so many sports, so many even endeavors outside of the sports arena. The fact is that you're doing a great job, and man, just keep up the great work. It's an honor to be on with you. I definitely appreciate it, and happy to talk Chiefs. Wish it were under different circumstances from this side of things, but am very much congratulations to you and the Eagles, because obviously they earned every bit of it. And a big parade coming up here, on Friday?
Friday, yeah. Friday. I would have loved to go into it, but I'm going to watch it on live stream. So
yeah, no, it's in the Eagles fans will enjoy every second of it. And, just be happy. You guys are the champions until somebody knocks you off. So you got that perch for at least another year, if not longer.
And next year, you got to watch out for Washington, Detroit. I feel San Francisco is going to rebound next year. I really do. And then in the AFC, you got Kansas City. Buffalo will, I think, still be competitive, but I don't know if they're going to do enough to get over the hump. And I think the Baltimore Ravens and Cincinnati, I know they didn't get in the playoffs this year, and I know their defense was terrible, but Joe Burrow's too good of a quarterback, and if he stays healthy next year, I think the Bengals will be back in the playoffs next year in the AFC as well.
Absolutely. And then, throw in the Texans as well. They have an incredible defense. They've got some offensive talent. And if there's any way that they can, add a little more, a few more pieces, obviously they had a receiving core. Injuries were the name of the game for everybody. Every team was impacted by injuries in some capacity the entire season. And I think that's the thing, is if you can provide that depth, any team that has depth is able to have some of that, able to overcome the injuries, because injuries and struggle is going to happen. It's going to hit you at some point. The challenges of just a 17-game season, it's a really long time. And so those things are going to happen. And how do you overcome that when it hits you? And the Niners struggled this year in that regard. But the Eagles overcame it. The Chiefs overcame it. There were a number of teams that did. And those were the teams that were standing at the end. And you're right. It's going to be fascinating offseason to see what happens. And excited about 2025, even though the 24 season just ended. Already looking forward to the new year ahead.
Patrick, where can my audience follow you on social media, and the best way of contacting you?
Sure. Yeah. On a number of things. I'm one of those that I don't have necessarily the same handle on everything. So certainly on Twitter, Patrick J. Pierce, on Instagram and Threads at, left_coast_living. So Left Coast Living is Instagram and Threads. And then on Blue Sky, it's one of those that, it's patrick-pierce.bsky.social. So I'm kind of on all of them, on LinkedIn as well. Happy to connect there. Still working in the public relations sector. Absolutely love it. I'm a former sports journalist, so a lot of contacts in sports media as well. Happy to make introductions and connections as well there with anyone who wants to connect with me. I'm always great about doing that. I love doing that, trying to, connect folks. And it's sports are so fun to talk about and fun to watch. And it's not our entire life, but certainly it's a fun part of it.
What I love about sports is they unite people. They unite them, and it's just everybody's out to just enjoy their team and the sports. And one thing I try to do, Patrick, is I try to be objective. Obviously, I love the Eagles and my teams, but on this show, I want other people from other diverse backgrounds or team, or if it's a sports show, to have their say on here and have their 2 cents. And I try to be objective. I really want to try to be one of these objective guys. As much as I want my team to win, I want other fans or other guests to come on here and feel comfortable talking to me. And I thank you for your support and friendship the last 4 years. And hopefully one day I'll run into you, because I'd love to catch a San Diego Padres game. And I would like to have you come back on maybe this summer to talk Padres baseball with us.
Oh, absolutely. That'd be an honor. I would love that. Looking forward to it. The Padres should have a good season. Obviously, the Royals are probably going to be right in contention. Your Tigers are going to be right there.
Yeah.
It's, and it'll just be interesting to see. We know the Dodgers are going to, probably be the favorite, with the Yankees and a number of these other teams that are kind of always there in contention. And it'll just be, pitchers and catchers are reporting now this week and spring training. And, the baseball season starts next month. So it's just around the corner.
Absolutely. Well, Patrick, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. Continued success, and we'll see you back in Super Bowl 60 next year. I think there'll be a part 3 between the Chiefs and Eagles. Depending on injuries, hopefully both teams can stay healthy, but I'm looking forward to it. CFL starts in a couple of months here, so I get a 9.5, 10 months of football a year, and I love it. The CFL, college football, and the NFL, it's great, and it's a great time of the year. So, Patrick, I'm going to let you go, but thank you so much for coming on. Give me a little bit of time tonight, and I will send you the video and the audio, and maybe break it up into some reels for you to tag on your social media.
Sounds good. Chris, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
All right, take care.
Have a good night. You too.
Bye.
All right, guys, that concludes season 9, episode 54, overall 494 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership in Wellington Brewery here in Guelph. I want to say thank you to not one, but 2 guests tonight. I want to say thank you to Robby Snyder from the 716 Sports Blizzard podcast in Buffalo, New York, for coming on. And I want to say thank you to my friend and former broadcaster and now a PR man in San Diego, Patrick Pierce, for coming on. So Robby came on, talked Bills with us, and Patrick came on to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs as well. Before we wrap up the show, guys, the next Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, again, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership in Wellington Brewery here in Guelph is going to be Valentine's Day on Friday, February 14th at 11 a.m. with my special guest, Dr. Ellen Wesley. She is an ER emergency doctor in Chicago, and she's also a stand-up comedian. And my other guest is going to be joining her. Her name is Grace Baller. And Grace Ballard is a stand-up comedian as well. So I've got two more great guests on my show on Friday, Valentine's Day at 11 a.m. So please check that out as well. And before I wrap this up, guys, the Cambridge and District Humane Society is celebrating their 70th anniversary with a masquerade black tie event this Thursday, tomorrow night, February 13th at Tapestry Hall, located at 74 Grand Avenue South in Cambridge, Ontario. Tickets are $250 for VIP admission, and general admission tickets are $175. And you can purchase your tickets via e-transfer exec.director@cambridgehumanesociety.org or in person at 1650 Dunbar Road in Cambridge, Ontario. Telephone number 519-623-7722, extension 0. Or for more information, cambridgehumanesociety.org. There's maybe a few tickets left, so if you want one, please contact the cambridgehumanesociety.org or pop by the dealership or pop by the Humane Society if you want to go to their masquerade event, which is tomorrow night in Cambridge. And that's about it, guys. I want to say thank you again to Robby Snyder and Patrick Pierce for coming on here tonight. Thank you to everyone watching us live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, X, and Instagram. And thank you to everyone listening to this on my audio platforms. And of course, to my sponsors, Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall, and Wellington Brewery at 950 Woodlawn Road West here in Guelph, Ontario. Try a welly on, and please remember to drink responsibly. I hope everybody has a great night, and we'll see you back here Friday at 11 a.m. on Valentine's Day for another edition of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show. Have a good night, everybody, and thanks again for watching and listening to Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Wellington Brewery and Barry Cullen Chevrolet here in Guelph.